An Australian recession is just around the corner. But what will it look like? What will it feel like? That's what we're going to discuss in today's podcast as I chat with Ken Race, Australia's leading property tax strategist and Director of Metropole Wealth Advisory. And when we chat, we're going to explain what to expect. And more importantly, we're going to give you 3 recommendations so that you can thrive rather than just survive. And we definitely don't want you to be a casualty of this recession. We're going to talk a bit about what you need to understand about a recession. We're going to explain a bit about how we think things are going to be different this time round and what you're likely to experience because we've been through this before personally, and Ken, as a student of economics, understands a bit more about this than many people. We're also going to talk about what it's going to look like after the recession, because there will be an after and it'll be good, don't worry. We're also going to talk about how to protect your downside, and as I said at the beginning, we're going to make some recommendations so you don't waste the opportunities this recession will bring. So welcome to today's episode of the Michael Yardney podcast.
Welcome to the Michael Yardney podcast, where twice each week you will learn a number of new ideas regarding success, property investment and money in around 30 minutes. Our show is brought to you by Metropole, who specialise in helping you grow, protect and pass on your wealth through strategic property and wealth advice. Now here's your host, Michael Yardney, Australia's most trusted property commentator who has once again been voted Australia's leading property investment advisor. That's the 5th time he's won a similar award in the last 7 years.
It's no secret that Australia is going to fall into recession. But what does that really mean? How will it affect you, your job, your finances, the value of your home or your investment properties? Today, I'd like to chat about what it would look like, what it would feel like as we work our way through the recession we're going to have. And is there anything you can do to protect yourself to minimise your downside? And then we're going to talk about what strategic property investors and business people are going to need to do to build their wealth in the months ahead. And then we're going to finish off with some specific recommendations so that at the end of today's session, you'll have a better understanding of what's ahead and what you can do to put yourself in a better position to thrive, not just survive the recession. That's what I want to chat about with Ken Race, Director of Metropole Wealth Advisory and Australia's leading property tax specialist. Welcome, Ken.
Hi, Michael.
Now, Ken, unfortunately, both you and I have lived through quite a number of property cycles, a number of economic shocks. And while many Australians haven't lived through a recession, today I'd like to talk about what it is like, because we've both lived through that, and how you can profit from a recession. Now, before some of our listeners and our viewers say, hey, how heartless, how could you consider profiting through a recession? I want to make one thing clear. I'm not suggesting we take advantage of people, but I am suggesting we take advantage of the opportunities that will arise. Recessions are always periods of significant opportunity. They're periods of a transfer of wealth. Look, that's just how the economy works. If you think about it, because of today's social distancing, we're not going to restaurants anymore, we're not going to pubs anymore, but we're still eating. That hasn't stopped. So some restaurants are prospering with takeaway, while other grocery stores and supermarkets are prospering because we're buying more food. So it doesn't always work that for you to win, somebody else is going to lose. So that's why I'm suggesting you can set yourself up to take advantage of the transfer of wealth. Now, Ken, we've lived through it before because most Australians never have dealt with a recession. First off, what's the definition?
Yeah, we certainly are living through strange times, and I think even the definition of a recession is going to change. But the technical definition is when the value of the goods and services we buy go down one quarter versus the previous quarter, and that happens for 2 quarters in a row. So if the prices fall this quarter, they'll then fall again the next quarter. So that's a technical recession because they have to measure it some way.
Well, why do you think this recession is going to be different to previous downturns?
And I think if I base that answer on my time when we had the recession we had to have, the previous recessions were after excessive demand, heating up of the economy, can I say low productivity growth. So the government had to stomp on it because inflation was getting out of hand, wage increases were getting out of hand, and we were digging ourselves into a hole. This time it's different. We've had medical emergencies where we've forced people not to spend, and more than that, stay at home. So therefore, we're seeing people not spending. And the other significant difference is the banking system and the cost of money. In the previous recession, to really slow down the economy, interest rates went through the roof. 17 odd percent, some people were paying 20. So it was a real crunch on the economy to stop people spending. And the banks, weren't helping people through those times of financial stress. Whereas this time the banks are forced, for want of a better word, to support business clients, to support mortgage owners. So the whole system is propping people up as best as it can, which has never happened before.
It is very different, isn't it? Because the government is helping businesses with the job keeper, it's helping employees with the job seeker. And because the banks are giving mortgage holidays or deferrals, doesn't mean you get out of paying your mortgage. There aren't going to be the forced mortgagee sales that happened when we've had previous downturns. So that's going to underpin the property markets. But Ken, Australia won't be alone in this. A global recession is likely, with the powerhouses of the United States and China having a huge hit to their economies as well.
Correct. And when we see Australia, it produces a lot more than it needs internally for its own internal consumption. That means we're an exporting economy. So we export our raw materials, some services, food, education is a big one, tourism is a big one. So while we've stopped people traveling, that's been a big impact on some of our biggest income earners, tourism and education, from those economies that are also closed their borders. So we're being hit on all fronts, as is every country. And that's been, if you like, exacerbated, made worse by, unfortunately, a lot of people succumbing to the disease, to the virus, and in many cases passing away.
Well, the medical consequences are tragic, but as we move forward, what can we expect to see? What's Australia going to be like for the balance of this year, and then hopefully over the next year as we start to move out of the recession? Let's start with one of the obvious ones. We're going to have higher unemployment. It's going to be harder to switch jobs, and it's going to be reasonable to expect that there's going to be a few more redundancies and terminations moving ahead, Ken.
Yes, and I think a lot of businesses who hadn't planned for the future, who weren't structurally robust, it's the time of reckoning. So I think a lot of businesses won't reopen.
That's unfortunate. That's terrible. But unfortunately, that is what happens with every recession. It's terrible when it happens to you, but it is a cleaning out and in some ways a survival of the fittest, isn't it?
Correct. So I think we're seeing changes to the way the economies work. We're going to have higher efficiency. So a lot more people were working from home. Yes, there was the mental issues. Could people cope from working from home? But we changed our IT platforms. We changed our processes. So efficiency levels have gone up. And I think a lot of manufacturing changed the way they plan, the way they have their supply chains. So efficiencies will grow, which I think we could see a bit of a silver lining, that with efficiency growing, allowing us to produce the same volume, maybe at a lower cost, I think that's going to be one of the stimuluses to start pushing up wages, that we haven't seen wage growth over many, many years. So I'm quite hopeful that when we finally come out of this, we're going to see some wage growth.
With a few more people out of work or working casually or not working their full hours, though, I can see moving forward, Ken, our spending power is going to be reduced, and that could affect retailing and industry in general.
Yes, I think people have seen, even if they weren't converts before, buying via the internet. So the bricks and mortar stores have moved to more internet based. So I think we're going to see an impact then on people physically working in these bricks and mortar stores. We've seen the restaurants change in doing delivery. I mean, just as a funny example, my son was telling me of the local pub who now delivers cocktails in little plastic bags. So people have become very inventive in what they do. And I think that's going to have an impact on the number of people who get employed. And also, I think the hours that people work will reduce. That's what they call underemployment. I think that will go up as well.
Yes, what I'm hearing then is that for a short while, income won't grow. In fact, many people will take a bit of a hit to their incomes. This is, in the short term, going to reduce spending power. And even those who are holding on to their jobs, I think for some of them it's going to impact their spending patterns as well, as they're probably a bit less willing to put money out there. They're just saving for a rainy day. And with regard to real estate markets, our property markets, they're going to take a hit as well, because social distancing and the inability to inspect properties and transact in the normal way is meaning that sellers aren't putting their properties on the market. There's less stock on the market. Only non-discretionary sellers, people who really have to sell, are putting their properties up for sale. People don't like this new concept of online auctions and inspecting. This means the number of transactions is going to decrease. There'll be fewer buyers, and those buyers who are going to take advantage of the opportunities around are going to be facing sellers who are going to be more keen to negotiate. So I can see property values dropping, but on much, much less volume in the next little while, which is going to be a good opportunity for those who are financially secure and stable to move ahead. But well-located investment-grade properties, A-grade homes, they're not seeming to fall much. Maybe 5%, they may fall about 10%. Secondary properties, B-grade properties are likely to suffer more, and C-grade properties, no one's buying those at the moment. But Ken, they're all the negative things, and we are going to get through this. I think we've got to remember that this is short and sharp. We're having a terrorist attack that will affect us, and we'll get out of it rather than the long, drawn-out war. But can you see any upsides to all this? We've already spoken about one, which I guess is increased efficiency and innovation. What else can you see?
Yes, I think we're going to see Australia, I think, have a mood change in what we produce and how we produce it. I think that term, our supply chain, where we've seen we are quite vulnerable in a number of key areas if we can't import those goods and services. So I think we're going to see some growth in the economy in some new industries, tightening up of some of the ownership of some of the industries. And I think before people start talking about xenophobia or this or that, at the end of the day, we have to be able to produce and have access to, can I say, essential goods and services. And I think it was almost a laissez-faire approach, because the world had opened up so much. We became a little bit lazy, as did a lot of other countries, on where was the cheapest place to source something. But now that we see, as soon as that supply line is cut, we're then vulnerable. So I think we're going to see some of those industries pick up. I think we've seen industries have completely different production of goods and services with the machinery, the stock, the floor space, the people they have. I was seeing one of the car manufacturers the other day is now making those medical protection masks. They've got the talent there, they're just now pushing it into other area. So I think that's going to be a big area, the supply chain. I think more and more the world is going to want our clean food, our clean education. So we just have to be careful on the spread of customers. I think like any business, if you have one customer, you're vulnerable. If you've got many customers, less so. So I think we're going to see a spread. Now, that doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't even happen in 1 or 2 years. It's going to happen over a very protracted period of time, which means the economy's got new areas that it can then grow into over, I would say, the next 5 to 10 years.
So there clearly are some upsides, and I
Mm.
think it's important to take that long-term view rather than a short-term view, as you say. I think another good upside is interest rates are going to remain at
Oh, yeah.
historic lows for a long time. The official cash rate sitting at 0.25%, and the Reserve Bank Governor, Philip Lowe's, come out on a number of occasions saying that it's not going to go up until unemployment drops to 4.5% or so. And he's even put a suggestion it could be 3 years, because while unemployment is going to go up and it'll probably hit double-digit figures, it will slowly come down. But looking at previous downturns, unemployment takes a while to slowly get back to normal again. I think another upside is falling property values, as we suggested, are going to provide a short-term window of opportunity. I don't see this as being a long-term downturn, because once we are free to go out and inspect again, once we're free to have auctions again, once the banks are able to process our loans faster again, there's a pent-up demand. So I think there's a short-term window of opportunity, and at the same time, the affordability we said. And I guess the same logic applies to shares. That's not an area I'm very good at. But Ken, for people with a long-term outlook, there's quite some opportunities in the bear market, aren't there?
There certainly are. I think it's going to be a lot more industry specific this time. The general market will grow. We saw after the GFC, it took a decade plus for the share market to really start picking up. But we saw the beginnings of a very strong share market last year, as we did property prices in the fourth quarter of calendar 2019. It rebounded. It started to rebound quite quickly. But now with the COVID-19 virus, it suppressed it. So I think it's a steaming pot that's got the lid being forced shut, that as soon as we can take that lid off, then I think we're going to see in certain sectors of the economy quite robust growth. And I think property certainly could be one. So for those people who have taken the time and the effort to get themselves ready, I think, like you were saying before, you take advantage of the situation, not people. Get yourself investment ready, get loans ready. It's now going to be cheap loans. Properties were coming back on the market. If you've got a job, then I think those people will be able to move fairly quickly and take advantage of the situation.
I love your analogy, Ken, that this is that boiling pot with the lid ready to pop off, because as we've already hinted, compared to previous downturns, both here and overseas, the current crisis isn't the result of a bust after a boom like we've had before. As we've said, it's an enforced shutdown. It's a significant disruption, but it wasn't caused by any fundamental flaw in the Australian economy. Look, we weren't booming along, but we were in second gear, in third gear. Now we're going to go into reverse for a little while. But Australia's entered this recession with a balance of trade positive and an almost balanced budget, and at a time, Ken, when our banking systems was very solid, very different to last time round. Further, our governments and governments around the world, they've learned from the past. They've learned particularly from the global financial crisis, and boy, have they stepped in early with unprecedented relief packages for people and for businesses to minimise the downside and to build that proverbial bridge across to good times. And at the same time, the government's provided financial support programs, encouraged banks to offer mortgage deferrals. And that, as I've said, means that's going to underpin our property markets if we're not having the mortgagee sales. And even commercial tenants and residential tenants are being offered support packages. Because of this, in my mind, it's likely that once the virus is under control, we're going to recover a bit more quickly than previous downturns, Ken.
Correct. And I think one of the other big differences, confidence wasn't sapped out of people. So previous recessions and downturns, people's confidences were sapped in many different areas: forced unemployment, higher interest rates, businesses collapsing. That really hasn't happened due to economic forces this time. So, as you said, very low interest rates, lowest that anyone's ever seen. We had a balanced budget. We were exporting more than we were importing. So the only negative in the economy, really, in a significant sense, was wage growth. That was fairly low. So we were starting to see some growth there, very green shoots, of course. But I think that coming out of the recession, once we tap into the unemployment, people start getting employed, the underemployment levels go down a bit, meaning that people can work more hours, then I think we will start seeing movement in wages. It's not going to be within 3 months, 6 months, maybe 12 months. But I think as long as people see light at the end of the tunnel, their confidence will build, which means they will spend.
I think confidence is one of the important factors that actually reflects all those other things. Your peace of mind, your financial security, your job security, interest rates, your confidence in your health. And interestingly, if we have a short downturn, it's going to be easier to regain your confidence. The longer it goes on, the longer it's going to take to turn your confidence around. So Ken, let's move forward. What's Australia going to look like after the recession? And we're probably talking only the end of this year, maybe early next year, depending upon how many quarters the GDP is going to go down. I guess the first one we've already said is interest rates are going to be low, not just in Australia, around the world. We've also realised that monetary policy has very little effect. The low interest rates aren't going to stimulate anything anymore. That effect has already worked through. But one of the other issues I see, Ken, is our government is going to be lumbered with a significant amount of debt with what it's already spending, but I can see it's going to require even further stimulus packages, grease the wheels of industry and get things going.
Correct. There's two levers. Monetary policy, which is interest rates. I mean, how far can they go? We saw oil prices move into negative territory. We sometimes see interest rates negative, but I think that's an aberration more than otherwise. So we're not going to really see a normal Australian being paid to take money off someone, but they will be low and for many years to come. The other lever is fiscal policy, which is taxes. So we had seen Australia moving to reduce taxes. I think that might slow down a bit. I don't really see Conservative governments lifting taxes. Their philosophy is build up the economy, allow people to make more money, have jobs and pay tax, and reduce, if you like, payment on the social security net. I think that's why there could be an extension of a lot of those stimulus packages to try and not spend ourselves out of the recession, but to try and generate that income. That is going to be a much healthier thing because it's more sustainable. And once businesses grow, they pay taxes. So I think there could be some things around the edges there with the way they treat some companies that maybe are paying less tax than a lot of people think they should. But even in that area, I think there's reasons. So stimulus packages, I think, will continue. And that's been one of the good things we've seen, irrespective of the political persuasion of a government around the world. Even the die-hard economists have had a social heart, if I can put it that way. And they were quick to move to that.
And that's been good to see, Ken. So moving forward, what's going to happen to inflation? Remember, we used to target 2 to 3% inflation. I can see that's going to be hard to achieve for a while.
Even now, when we're seeing advertisements for goods and services, people gouging the Australian population. There's still the specials, particularly in the Woolies, the Coles, the Bunnings, all those big shops, the clothing stores. So I think we're not going to see price rises because those vendors know that if people haven't had high wage increases, there's limited money and people are going to be more sensible where they spend and they're going to look for value. So I can't see inflation growing to any significant amount. That's why I think we're going to want to see employment levels being pushed up over a shorter period of time than otherwise, which will put a bit of a lid on wage increases, but at least people will go back to the wages or getting close to the wages they had before.
Talking about retail, I was thinking that once we come out of this lockup, a lot of shops are going to have specials and sales. They've got their stock that they've had that they haven't sold, and they've got their winter stock coming in. So I can see retail prices coming down rather than going up for a while. But like you, I was very impressed that when I did go to Woolies the other day, they still have their specials. There is some social responsibility and some good has come out of this. Moving forward, looking at what else we could be like in Australia on the other side of the recession, unemployment is still going to remain high and will take a while to dwindle down because certain industries are still going to suffer. Sure, others are going to blossom, as we've suggested, but tourism, education, retail, and in fact, to some degree, the financial sector is going to continue suffering. On the other hand, some industries are still going to prosper. Governments, you already talked about manufacturing, localization of some of the manufacturing that occurred overseas, health, technology, defence, agriculture, and infrastructure spending. I hope the government is going to spend money on infrastructure because that uses local goods, services, labour, but it leaves a legacy for the future, Ken.
It does. And I think what we need in Australia, and hopefully it'll come out of this, is a big change to the red and green tape that they always talk about. How long does it take for a project to actually commence? And all the different blockages that different groups can put to stop different infrastructure projects. So I think now there's going to be more of a national empathy to a lot of projects. For valid reasons, some projects shouldn't go ahead, no problems with that. But there needs to be a more sensible approach of what can stop viable, needed projects, dams, roads.
Now, a quick disclaimer, be careful. Don't, if you're a property investor, invest for infrastructure because it doesn't always lead to extra property values in the area. Ken, one thing I'm thinking about at the moment is all those people who speculated about Sydney's second airport. You wonder now with what's happening with overseas travel, is there really going to be a need for that airport? Well, there will be one day, but maybe not as soon as we'd thought it would be.
And look, we've seen around the world second airports being built, and they've been white elephants for decades and decades. Because at the end of the day, when you land, you want to get to where you're getting to. You don't want to catch the red rattler on a train. So the infrastructure has to be everything. And I think there will be a slowdown to that airport. I mean, I remember 35 years ago, such a long time, they talked about Badgerys Creek, that second airport in Sydney.
So let's move forward with some recommendations of what you should consider doing to take advantage and thrive, not just survive in these difficult times. The first recommendation, don't overreact. Recessions are largely driven by how the population as a whole is feeling about the economy. The consumer confidence Ken was talking about a moment ago, not as much about the economy itself. So investors overreact. And there's no doubt that some bargains are going to become available in the stock market, in the property market, because some sellers are going to overreact. So my suggestion is take advantage of those opportunities, but don't be on the other side where you're going to suddenly sell up and make 30-year investment decisions based on the last 30 minutes or 30 days of news. So I guess the other message I'd like to give you is think long-term. Think 10 years down the road. If you want to really build a significant property portfolio or wealth in your business or in any other way, think long-term outside the normal ups and downs of the economic cycle, because this is just another economic cycle. Came out of the blue. But the other point, Ken, I think people are going to try and time the market. They've always done that, and they've always got it wrong.
Always.
So don't try and time the market, because I still see this window of opportunity as being on the short side. And so just think back a year or two ago when people thought, I'm going to wait until after the election. I'm going to wait to see the results of things. By the time you find out the market has turned up, professionals and our clients who we've been buying for have actually bought the properties that you're reading about that push the market values up. But I also think, Ken, it's a really good time to build a solid financial foundation, have the right finance strategies in place, buy time with your finance strategies, not just property, to ride the ups and downs. And that's why we always recommend our clients have the right finance strategies with buffers in place, get the right ownership structures in place to ensure you maximize your upside, protect your risks, minimize your tax, pass on your wealth to future generations. Ken, I know that over the last little while, you and your team at Metropole Wealth Advisory have been busier than ever. Isn't it interesting how people have come out of the woodwork to say, hey, I can see an opportunity. I'm going to get myself ready for the next stage?
Yeah, I think they've basically come from two different camps. It was those people, call it 12 months ago, I'll do it differently. I don't know, I need this. They've now found that had they put in place those solid foundations, they'd be able to move much better, much more efficiently, more profitable now. There's another group of people who are always looking at how do I do things different to take advantage of any benefits that I see on the horizon. So a lot of people are always getting investment ready. Others don't and then wish they had and then try and come in quicker. So it's better late than never, I tell people. Don't cry over spilt milk, because it's better now than in years to come.
But there's clearly a lot more people currently getting themselves ready. They're strategically focused. They're positioning themselves for the future. Now, Ken, you've heard this before, and the people listening to this podcast or watching this video have possibly heard me say it before, but I want to bring some certainty to these uncertain times. In 12 months' time, we're going to be a year further down the track. And somewhere between now and then, we're going to cross what I call a survival line. I don't know whether it's going to be in 6 weeks or 6 months, but at that stage, desire, greed is going to be a bigger driver than fear at the moment. And I'm seeing three ways people are thinking, three-way business people are thinking, three-way investors are thinking, and some are freezing, some are fear-focused, some are panicking, some are only worried about the here and now. And those people won't necessarily cross that survival line. Their businesses are going to close down. They've sold up their shares, and unfortunately, they're not going to get the upside. And some are even thinking about selling property, and that's a silly, silly thing to do. I think the majority of people, they're a bit unfocused. They're hunkering down. They're buying the pasta and the rice, and they're just going to hunker down until we get through all this, and they will survive. They'll cross that survival line. They'll be there in a year's time, but they're going to miss out on those great opportunities that those strategically focused business owners, investors, and professionals are taking advantage of. They're taking this opportunity to set themselves up by getting the right ownership structures, by making sure that their ownership structures are tax effective, that they're not got leakage, and that they can get their finance to move forward. They're using this as a window of opportunity. Ken, what's the commonest thing people are currently asking you when they sit with you with us to get a strategic wealth plan?
The first one is for people in business, are they correctly structured to safeguard their wealth, to minimize their tax? And we're not talking about tax avoidance, we're talking about avoidable over tax paying. So there's lots of people in that situation who quite simply could be paying less tax. So it's a restructuring of their business. Another one is I'm seeing a lot of clients who are now starting to be concerned about asset protection. So how can they protect their assets? And that's now, while they're alive, while they're in business, but more so when they pass it to the next generation. So how can I safely pass on to my children, knowing that it's going to stay within my lineal bloodline descendants? So a lot of people are very concerned about that. Thirdly is people don't really understand, how do I actually create wealth for myself that I'll be able to retire on passively? By passively, I mean the money's going to flow through. There'll be some little ups and downs, obviously, with different economic climates, but that passive income. So it's preparing that plan for people that takes them step by step so they have some certainty. They actually know they'll get a result. And those three things, I think, when you put them all together, equally apply to my clients in business, people in professional services, people in jobs wanting to just do a little bit better for themselves and or their family.
So when people see you at Metropole Wealth Advisory, what I have noticed is they get a deeper insight. They understand what's going on because you're able to weave the perspectives of property, tax, finance, financial planning, the law with your multidisciplinary approach. And then you help them to use those disciplines optimally. I know you also help people have clarity. They have asset protection. As you said, they help minimize their tax. And a large part of it is estate planning to be able to pass it on to future generations. What I've always been impressed with, though, is that you actually help them implement that. So you don't do their weekly regular tax returns, but as a project manager, you get the various disciplines together, you audit what their existing position is, you assess the various options that they have, and then you manage the various disciplines to help them get the results that they want. So if people are keen to have a chat with you, they should contact us at Metropole, and there's a link on the page at the moment, or if you're listening to the podcast, it'll be in the show notes. You go to metropole.com.au, find out about Ken Race and Metropole Wealth Advisory and the range of services they can provide. And this is particularly for business owners and professionals who want to take their business to the next level and use the funds from their business to build a business on the outside without as many moving parts of the property business. And it's also for property investors who want to treat their properties as a business, not just to buy one property or two and get stuck at that level, but to build a substantial asset base. One of the things you pointed out a moment ago, Ken, that I know I've noticed is many of them don't really understand what the end game is. This is all very good, but they've actually never thought, how's it all going to finish? How are they going to live off it all? And that's where I know your strategic plans are very helpful.
If we don't know the size of the problem, how far we want to go, we don't know what we need to do. So then our mindset, I think, just jumps from one problem to another. And then when something crops up like COVID-19, it sort of pulls the rug out of people. But if you sort of see a plan, it's got an exit strategy, you've got some safety nets in place, we should assume these sorts of things will come up every now and again. So therefore, we're not fearful of when they do come up, because while we didn't plan for that specific event, we did plan for uncertainty.
So if you've been watching Ken and me, and you can now see that we will get through this, if you've been listening to this as the audio version of it, you've got one of three choices. You can be one of those people who is just going to worry and panic, fear, and not get across the survivor line. Maybe you're just going to hunker down, like, let's be blunt, the majority of Australians, and you'll get through, but you're not going to take advantage of this. An opportunity like this to take advantage of a significant downturn to set yourself up for the future. This is when, in the past, I've noticed intergenerational wealth be able to be formed. It's when great businesses have been formed. Classically, Disney came out of a recession. Uber came out of the recession they had in the United States a decade ago. You could also then be in that last category, that small category of strategic investors who are now going to seek advice and set themselves up. I'm not saying it's the right time for you to buy a property now or tomorrow. I don't know your circumstances. But for many people, remember, even if 20% of the population is unemployed, 80% are still going to be gainfully employed. If you're in a secure position, if you're secure about your future, now's the time to catch up with Ken or the team at Metropole and secure the balance of your financial future and thrive, not just survive in these challenging times. Ken, thank you so much for your time. We'll be back regularly to work our way through this, but at least now people who've taken the time to listen to your and my thoughts are going to have a little bit of a better understanding of what's ahead. And if we do have some inkling of what's ahead, that takes away a level of the uncertainty and the fear, doesn't it?
And I hope that we've been able to calm down some people's mindset. People see that it's not all gloom and doom, and that there is light at the end of the tunnel, and you just need that clarity to push through.
Thanks for your time, Ken. Catch up again real soon.
Thank you, Michael.
Clearly, there are some uncertainties ahead, but hopefully you've now got a better understanding of what may happen and what you can do about the recession
that we're going to have. Now, if you got some benefit from this, why not help other people get a level of certainty and direction by telling somebody about this podcast? My aim is to get as many people as possible more financially fluent to get through these challenging times and then take advantage of the opportunities that are going to come on the other side. So help me by telling other people, pass the message forward as well. You can do it through social media or just tell somebody about it. And if you want to tell the world about it, and I read out your review as I'm about to do for Alberto, I'm going to say thank you by gifting you one of my books. And on iTunes just recently, Alberto left a 5-star review saying, very informative. Hi, Michael. I find your podcast very informative and easy to follow. Personally, I get the most value out of those covering different property investment strategists and demographics. Keep up the great work. Thanks, Alberto. Well, thank you, Alberto, for leaving that review. And if you email me, michael@metropole.com.au, I look forward to gifting you one of my books as a way of saying thank you. I'll be back again twice a week with this podcast to help you get through these challenging times. But in the meantime, you can keep in contact with me through social media. Just look for me everywhere as Michael Yardney, or of course on my daily property update, where every morning you're going to get advice, not just from me, but from a range of property, tax, finance and success experts. In the meantime, have a great week. Make it a great week.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Michael Yardney podcast, which was brought to you by Metropole, who help their clients grow, protect and pass on their wealth through strategic property and wealth advice. If you like what you heard and don't already subscribe, you'll find us on iTunes or on your favourite Android app as the Michael Yardney podcast. Watch out for our next show, which comes to you twice a week, and you'll learn some new ideas about property investment, success and money in around 30 minutes. To get more of Michael's thoughts, go across to www.propertyupdate.com.au and sign up for his daily morning briefing, and you'll hear from not only Michael but a group of leading property success and money experts. And just a reminder that the information you heard in this show today is general educational advice and not specific investment advice, as we don't know your personal circumstances. If you're looking for specific advice, why not ask the team at Metropole to help you?